Okay, let's unpack this. I want you to imagine a scenario. Just put yourself in this room. It's 1950.
All right, 1950.
You're a doctor, and you are standing in a delivery room. You have a patient in labor, and let's say it's a pretty difficult labor.
Which was incredibly common, obviously.
Right. Now, you can measure the mother's blood pressure. You can check her pulse. You can ask her, where it hurts. You have all this data on her.
Yeah, that's standard procedure, even back then.
But then there's the other patient in the room, the baby.
Ah.
And regarding that baby, you are effectively flying blind.
Yeah.
I mean, you have absolutely no way of knowing what is happening inside that womb.
None at all.
You don't know if the baby's getting enough oxygen. You don't know if their heart rate is crashing.
Yep.
You are literally just waiting for them to come out to see if they're alive.
It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? But that was the reality of obstetrics for centuries. The fetus was essentially a black box.
A complete mystery.
Exactly. In fact, historically, the fetus wasn't even really viewed as a separate patient. Yeah. It was seen as a part of the mother, almost like an organ or an appendage. You managed the mother, and the baby was just...
The result.
Right. The result, an after effect of the pregnancy.
So it was just a massive wait-and-see game,
Yeah.
but with the highest stakes imaginable.
Completely.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into the man who smashed that black box wide open. The man who decided that hoping for the best just wasn't a valid medical strategy. We're talking about Erich Saling.
A name that really should be as famous as Pasteur or Lister.
Yeah, you really don't hear it enough outside of medical history circles.
You don't. But in those circles, he is widely recognized as the father of perinatal medicine. And looking at the sheer volume of sources we're pulling from today, the biographies, technical papers, patent records,
There's a lot.
so much. It is not an exaggeration to say that he single-handedly dragged obstetrics into the modern age.
It's incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
if you were born after, say, 1965, the fact that you were sitting here today, healthy, breathing, without brain damage from oxygen deprivation,
It's highly likely because of protocols this man invented.
that is wild.
It is. And the central theme of his life, the thing that drove him for 70 years, was this realization that the time around birth is, and I'm quoting his actual words here, the most dangerous stage of life.
That's a heavy statement.
It is, but statistically, it's absolutely true. You can live for 80 years, drive cars, catch the flu, maybe smoke a cigarette or two.
Sure.
But the few hours of labor and delivery, that is statistically the moment you are most likely to die or suffer a permanent injury.
Wow.
And Saling made it his absolute mission to change those odds.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. You would expect a medical pioneer like this to come from, I don't know, a long line of famous surgeons or wealthy academics.
Right, the typical pedigree.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Saling's story starts in a completely different setting. It starts in a forest.
It does. Erich Saling was born in 1925 in Stanislaw. Back then it was Poland. Today it's part of Ukraine. And his father, Heinrich, was a forestry manager.
A forestry manager. I just love this detail so much.
Yeah.
So he wasn't learning anatomy at the dinner table. He was learning about trees.
He was learning about systems, really.
Right.
And more importantly, he was learning craftsmanship.
Okay.
The sources emphasize that young Erich inherited a very specific set of hands-on craft skills from his dad. He learned how to build things, how to fix mechanical issues, how to tinker.
Which sounds like a great hobby for a kid, but how does that translate to saving babies?
Well, think about the era. In the 1950s, if you had a theory about a new medical tool, you couldn't just hop on the internet and order a prototype from a manufacturer in China.
Right.
The tools just didn't exist. If you wanted to look inside the womb, you had to physically build the window yourself.
So that tinker mindset was actually a prerequisite for the job he was about to do.
Exactly. He had the medical theory, yes. But he also had the engineering grit to go down to a workshop and actually construct the devices he needed with his bare hands.
Before he could start building anything, though, he had to get through the 1940s. And looking at his timeline, it is just chaotic.
Chaotic is putting it mildly. He finishes his abitur, his high school exams, in 1943. He's 18 years old, and immediately he is conscripted into the military.
So he spends 2 years in the Wehrmacht during the absolute collapse of the German front in World War II.
Right, just brutal conditions. And then, in 1945, amidst the rubble and the ruin of post-war Germany, he decides to enroll in medical school, first in Jena, and then he moves to Berlin.
And you have to remember, studying in Berlin between 1945 and 1952 meant navigating a city that was literally being ripped in half.
Oh, yeah. The sources mention he was constantly moving between the Soviet sector and the Western sectors just to attend classes and do his studies.
Unbelievable stress.
Immense instability, but he stuck with it. He eventually got his doctorate from the Free University of Berlin in 1952, but here's the real pivot point.
Okay.
When he finally qualifies as a specialist in 1958, he chooses gynecology and midwifery.
Which apparently was the unfashionable choice at the time.
Extremely unfashionable. It wasn't the rock star medicine of the era. Cardiac surgery, neurology, that was where the glory was.
That's where you went if you wanted to be famous.
Exactly. Obstetrics was seen as messy, unpredictable, and frankly, a bit low-tech. It was viewed as women's work by a very traditional, male-dominated medical establishment.
But Saling had this trait that keeps coming up in the texts. Stubborn persistence.
Yeah.
He didn't care about the prestige. He saw a mechanical problem that needed fixing.
He saw that black box, and he decided he was going to build a dashboard for it.
So let's get into the how then. Because almost immediately after he qualifies, the inventions just start coming. And the first one is a perfect example of that forestry background meeting medicine.
You're talking about the newborn resuscitation machine.
Right. What was the situation in the delivery room before he built this thing?
It was primitive. If a baby was born and wasn't breathing, doctors would try to manually clear the airway with a simple suction bulb, maybe do mouth-to-mouth.
Just guessing, basically.
Very inconsistent. So Saling, realizing he needed a better tool, built a double-barreled machine with his own hands.
How did it actually work?
Simple physics. It had two tubes. One tube blew pure oxygen into the lungs to inflate them and deliver oxygen. The other tube simultaneously sucked mucus and fluid out of the airway.
So it's a continuous cycle.
Right. It allowed for clearing and oxygenating at the exact same time.
It sounds so logical. Blow the good stuff in, suck the bad stuff out.
It is logical, but nobody else had built it. That is the Saling difference right there. He didn't just write a theoretical paper about how resuscitation should work. He built the machine that made it work.
But the real game changer, the innovation that completely defines his career, happened right around 1960, 1961. This is fetal blood analysis.
Yes, this is the moment obstetrics shifts from an art into a hard science.
Okay, let's slow down and really explain this one, because to me, this sounds like absolute science fiction for 1960.
It really was.
I mean, I know what a blood test is. I go to the clinic, I give you my arm, you take blood. But we are talking about a baby that is still hidden inside the mother. How on earth do you get a blood sample?
That was the puzzle. Now, Saling had been using blood gas analysis on newborns after they were delivered, checking their oxygen and carbon dioxide levels to see if his resuscitation machine was doing its job.
Okay, that makes sense.
And he realized that the chemistry of the blood told the absolute truth about the baby's health.
Because if the baby isn't getting oxygen, the blood chemistry actually changes.
Exactly. And this is the key concept we need to understand here. Anaerobic metabolism.
Break that down for us.
Sure. When a human body, whether it's an adult or a fetus, runs out of oxygen, it doesn't just shut down instantly. It switches to an emergency power source.
A backup generator.
Exactly. It starts creating energy without using oxygen. But the byproduct of that emergency process is lactic acid.
Like when you sprint way too hard and your legs start to burn.
Precisely. That burn you feel is lactic acid building up in your muscles. Now, imagine that happening to a tiny fetus. If the baby is suffocating during a long labor, that acid builds up in their blood.
And what does acid do? It lowers the pH level.
Exactly. A drop in pH is a chemical siren going off. It is scientific, undeniable proof that the baby is in distress.
So Saling knew what he needed to measure.
Right. The problem was just how to get the blood to measure it.
And this is where he teams up with a chemist, K. Damashkin.
Yes. Together, they developed a high-speed method to test blood oxygen and pH levels using only tiny, microscopic amounts of blood.
Because you can't exactly draw a whole vial from a fetus.
No, you just need a drop. So Saling developed a physical technique where, once the mother's cervix was dilated enough and the water had broken, he could reach in with a specially designed tool.
And do what?
He would make a tiny superficial scratch on the baby's scalp, because the head is usually the part presenting first in the birth canal, just a small prick.
Okay.
A single drop of blood would form on the scalp. He would then collect that drop into a long, thin glass capillary tube.
While the baby is still fully inside the mother.
While the baby is still inside, he would take that glass tube, run the analysis on his machine, and within minutes, he would have a hard pH number.
That is just wild. So suddenly the doctor isn't just standing there guessing. He's not putting a stethoscope to the belly and thinking, maybe the heartbeat sounds a little slow.
No more guessing. He has a binary decision tool.
Wow.
If the pH is normal, you know the baby is fine. You can wait, let labor progress naturally. But if the pH is low, if it's acidic, you know for a fact the baby is suffocating, and you need to perform an emergency C-section right then and there.
That is the ultimate shift from guessing to knowing.
It really is. It saved thousands of babies from unnecessary surgery, and it saved thousands more from severe brain damage caused by waiting just a little too long.
And he didn't stop there. He was on a roll. In 1962, he comes out with another invention.
Früchtwasserspiegel, I hope I said that right.
Close enough. Or, as we call it in English, the amnioscope. The amnioscope. This one sounds more visual than chemical.
It was. This was all about looking before you leap. The device itself was incredibly simple. It was basically a conical metal tube with a bright light source attached to it.
Like a specialized flashlight.
Sort of. Saling would insert it through the cervix to press gently against the amniotic sac, the bag of waters, before it had even broken.
So he's looking through the membrane.
Yes, he's shining a light through to look at the amniotic fluid itself, because he was looking for one very specific warning sign, meconium.
Which is?
The baby's first stool.
Ah.
See, when a fetus is under severe stress, usually from oxygen deprivation, their anal sphincter relaxes and they pass stool into the amniotic fluid. It turns the normally clear water to a murky green or brown.
Oh, wow. So if Saling looked through his metal tube and saw green water.
He instantly knew the baby was in trouble, even before labor really got going. It was just another brilliant way to peer into that black box.
It's amazing to me because these aren't supercomputers. It's a metal tube with a light. It's a tiny scratch on the scalp. It's relatively low tech, but the impact is astronomical.
And this leads us to the bigger picture here.
Yep.
The technology is fascinating, yes, but the philosophy behind it is what truly revolutionized the entire field of medicine.
The sources refer to this as a paradigm shift. Saling wasn't just making cool gadgets in his workshop. He was changing the very definition of who the patient was.
Correct. He essentially discovered the fetus as a patient. He wrote a groundbreaking book called Das Kind im Bereich der Geburtshilfe.
Which translates to the child in the context of obstetrics.
Right. And in this book, he argued that the obstetrician has two patients in that room, not one.
Which, again, seems so obvious to us sitting here today.
It does now, but back then, it was highly controversial.
Why? Why would anyone in the medical field object to treating the baby as a patient?
Because it drastically increased their responsibility. Think about it. If the fetus is an official patient, you are now legally and ethically liable for its well-being.
Ah, I see.
You have to monitor it. You have to actively intervene. A lot of the traditionalists felt that birth was a natural process and nature should just take its course.
And Saling wasn't having that.
Not at all. Saling was saying, no, nature is failing these babies and we now have the tools to save them. We have to use them. It completely disrupted the comfortable status quo.
He had that famous quote we mentioned earlier, "The period around an individual's birth is the most dangerous stage of life."
It became his rallying cry. He absolutely refused to accept that death at birth was just fate or bad luck.
So we move into the 70s. Saling is well established. He's the expert in his field.
Yeah.
But reading through these notes, I was genuinely shocked by what came next.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Because he moves from immediate crisis management in the delivery room to, well, it looks exactly like early telemedicine.
This is hands down one of my favorite parts of his career. It just shows his incredible foresight. We tend to think of telemedicine as a very modern thing. Zoom calls, smartphone apps.
Yeah.
Saling was doing this in 1978.
1978. I mean, people barely had touch-tone phones in their houses.
Right. But he was heavily focused on the problem of premature birth. He knew that by the time a pregnant woman feels strong contractions and physically drives to the hospital, it's often too late to stop the labor.
The baby just comes out too early, and their lungs aren't ready to breathe air.
Exactly. So he realized he needed to catch those contractions while the woman was still at home.
Okay, so how did he pull that off in the 70s?
He and a colleague, Hugh Blücher, invented a portable device called a cacodymometer.
That is quite a mouthful.
It's just a fancy word for a sensor that measures uterine contractions. They gave these portable boxes to women who were at high risk for premature labor.
Okay.
The woman would strap the sensor to her belly at home. The device would pick up the muscle activity of her uterus and then convert that data into an acoustic signal. Literally beeps and tones.
Oh, I think I see where this is going. Like an old dial-up modem.
Exactly like that. The woman would pick up her telephone handset, call the hospital, and hold the phone up to the speaker on this device. The beeps would travel over the standard copper phone lines to the clinic, where another machine decoded those beeps back into a visual graph.
He literally wired the human womb directly to the public telephone network.
He did. A doctor could be sitting in his office, drinking a cup of coffee, looking at a real-time graph of a patient's uterus from 10 miles across the city.
That is just mind-blowing for 1978.
And the best part is, it worked. It allowed for rapid, early intervention. If the doctor saw dangerous contraction activity on the graph, they could immediately tell the woman over the phone to take specific medication.
Stopping the labor before it became irreversible.
Exactly.
That connects right back to that theme of prevention. Saling wasn't just interested in saving the baby during the crash. He was trying to prevent the crash from happening in the first place.
Which brings us perfectly to his other major focus later in his career: infection.
Right, the ascending infection theory.
Yes. Saling realized that a huge percentage of premature births were actually caused by bacteria moving up or ascending from the vagina into the uterus.
And that bacteria weakens the amniotic sac.
It does. It causes the water to break weeks or months too early.
So how did he tackle the infection problem?
Well, initially, around 1978, he introduced very strict vaginal disinfection protocols for hospitals, but his most elegant genius solution came much later in 1999 and 2000.
This is the indicator-coated panty liner.
Yes. It sounds like such a humble, everyday product, doesn't it? But it's actually brilliant science.
How does a simple panty liner stop premature birth? Walk us through this.
It all comes back to pH again. Saling really understood the diagnostic power of pH.
Right, like with the scalp blood tests.
Exactly. Now, a healthy vaginal environment is naturally acidic. That acidity kills off bad bacteria, but if a dangerous infection is starting to brew, the environment becomes more alkaline. The pH number goes up.
And I'm assuming that chemical change happens long before the woman actually feels sick or notices symptoms?
Long before, days or weeks before. So Saling developed and patented a standard panty liner with a built-in litmus test strip.
Oh, wow.
If the color on the strip changed, the woman instantly knew her pH was off. She could just go to her doctor, get a simple, cheap round of antibiotics, and clear the infection entirely before it ever triggered premature labor.
I love this invention so much because it puts the power directly in the patient's hands. He didn't build $1 million machine for the hospital this time. He made a simple tool for the bathroom cabinet.
It's the ultimate democratization of safety. He realized that the absolute best person to monitor a pregnancy was the pregnant woman herself. Give her the tools and she will protect her baby.
That is incredible. Now, Saling was a professor at the Free University of Berlin for a long, long time. But in 1991, he turned 65. And in the German university system, that means mandatory retirement.
Yes, the university essentially said, "Thank you for your service, time to go home." But Saling really wasn't the type to just sit on a porch and feed pigeons all day.
Retirement is for other people.
Truly. 2 years after he quote-unquote retired in 1993, he founded the Erich Saling Institute for Perinatal Medicine in Berlin.
Just started his own place.
It was a non-profit. He basically built his own institute from scratch just so he could keep working on these problems.
And he kept going for a remarkably long time.
He did. He worked tirelessly on preventing preterm births and improving prenatal care worldwide, essentially until the very end of his life. He passed away in 2021 at the age of 96.
96. That is a 70-year career in medicine.
And a very full, rich life outside of the lab, too. The sources mention he was married to Hella Wayman, who was a fellow physician for nearly 70 years. They got married back in 1952.
A real medical power couple.
They had 2 sons, Peter, who actually became a gynecologist just like his father, and Michael, who went into business. And by the time Saling passed, he had many grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Which feels incredibly poetic, doesn't it? A man who spent his entire life ensuring that other people got to have healthy grandchildren, getting to enjoy a large, thriving family of his own.
It is a very fitting legacy for him.
So as we wrap this up, let's zoom out a bit. We've gone from the forestry manager's son tinkering with metal tubes to the man who literally wired up pregnancies to the telephone network. When you look at Erich Saling's contribution as a whole, what is the big takeaway for you?
I think the main takeaway is his absolute refusal to accept the black box. He refused to accept that we couldn't know what was happening inside the womb.
He made the invisible visible.
Exactly. He used every single tool available to him, chemistry, optics, mechanics, even the telephone, to turn the fetus from an appendage into a patient that could be actively treated. He moved us from faith to hard science in the delivery room.
And it really strikes me that Many people listening to us right now, or maybe their children or grandchildren, might literally not be here without those innovations.
It is highly probable. Whether it was the fetal heart monitoring, the focus on pH levels, or just the general cultural shift in attention toward the unborn child, Saling's fingerprints are on practically every single birth that happens in a modern hospital today.
It really puts things in perspective. We live in an age right now where we are so obsessed with the next high-tech miracle. We want AI doctors, we want robotic surgery, gene editing.
But Saling's story reminds us that sometimes the life-saving solution isn't a supercomputer.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in 1978, he used a standard rotary telephone to save premature babies.
Huh.
In 2000, he used a panty liner with a piece of litmus paper to prevent major infections.
That is the provocative thought I'm left with after reading all this material. Saling looked at a 100-year-old technology to the telephone, and he saw a medical device. He looked at a simple pH strip and saw a lifesaver.
It makes you ask yourself, what other low-tech solutions are we completely overlooking today? We're all so busy looking for massively complex answers, but maybe the solution to our biggest medical problems is sitting right there in the hardware store, just waiting for someone with a tinkerer's mindset to pick it up.
Sometimes the most revolutionary tool of all is just a fresh perspective and a healthy dose of stubborn persistence.
A fresh perspective and maybe some forestry skills.
Hey, it couldn't hurt.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the life of Erich Saling. We'll catch you on the next one.